Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for Jetro Chicago's JConnect webinar. My name is Kevin Cow, Business Development Specialist from Jetro Chicago, and I will be moderating the webinar. Our exciting topic for today is blockchain, featuring 3 companies based in Chicago and Toronto. We would like to welcome you if this is your first time attending a JConnect webinar, and welcome back if you've been here before. Our focus is to help connect innovative North American startups to Japanese affiliated companies doing business here in North America, and most importantly, to help facilitate business relationships between the two. Likewise, it aims to improve the productivity of Japanese companies and to help accelerate their open innovation strategies. Jetro recently added a landing page for our JConnect webinar series on our Jetro USA webpage. You can find dates and information on upcoming industry topics, as well as recordings of our previous webinars. Today's topic, blockchain, which may be familiar to you as a distributed, decentralized public ledger that is a record-keeping technology behind things such as Bitcoin. The practical applications of blockchain go beyond Bitcoin, however, and can be used to store data about property exchanges, stops in a supply chain, or even votes for a candidate. The global market for blockchain technology is anticipated to grow anywhere from $20 to $40 billion by 2025 as companies continue to adopt and implement the technology. I will let our 3 speakers give their guidance and expertise on blockchain solutions. Therefore, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Uri Klarman, founder and CEO of Bloxroot. Dr. Uri Klarman is an interdisciplinary networks researcher and doctorate from Northwestern University, where Bloxroot Labs was the keynote of his doctoral dissertation work. Bloxroot Labs is building the network infrastructure to scale Web 3.0 and was the first to pinpoint the important role the network layer plays in peer-to-peer networks. As such, Dr. Klarman brings a unique perspective to the blockchain space, from optimizing how nodes communicate to how Ethereum DeFi traders can take advantage of the networking layer. Further bio and company information can be found for the speakers on the registration page as always. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Dr. Klarman.
Thanks, Kevin. Thank you. Let me share my screen here for a second. There we are. Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that.
Looks good. Okay.
Okay. Are you talking about the screen or me?
Yeah.
So, hi everybody, my name is Uri Klarman. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bloxroot. As Kevin said, take all the long emphasis of what is it that Bloxroot do. We provide a network solution that allows blockchain to operate at scale. Who cares about blockchain? Why are we talking about this at all? Let's dive right into it. So, hold on. There we are. Why are we talking about blockchains to begin with? What is it like you hear about Bitcoin or Ethereum or crypto and blockchain use for supply chains? Like why are everybody so excited about? Why there's so much money in it? Here's the thing. You know how letters evolved over time? It used to be that you write a letter to somebody, but then there was emails and then texting and chats and emojis and tweets and chatbots. Chatbots is the craziest thing, right? You chat with a machine, you know it's a machine, but you're still like texting with it. So all of that is happening. And if you told somebody 50 years ago that each one, like practically the entire Western world is going to send hundreds of letters every day, right? We send text to them, they'll say, that makes no sense, right? Nobody even has the time to write hundreds of letters each day. But letters are transformed into something completely different. And now blockchains are doing the same thing for transactions. We think about transaction as, going to the supermarket and buying something, but now this is turning into something very, very different. And what is it that blockchains bring to the table and the reason people get so excited about it? That's actually an hour-long presentation just for itself. So I'm going just to give a few samples of why people care about it. Blockchains allow to create programmable money. What does that mean? It means that if right now people are trading on the New York Stock Exchange or other things, you could actually program the money to take, if you identify, let's say, an arbitrage opportunity or something like that, you can have the money go take a loan, use that loan to take advantage of that arbitrage, sell it and return the loan and profit from it. And the money is programmed so you couldn't take it in the loop. So all sorts of new financial creatures and financial constructs could be created for that. So that's one thing. Micropayments. If you guys are using any social media like Facebook or Twitter or any of the others, then you know they're selling your data for, like, in order to sell you ads, right? That's a business model. What if we could change these platforms? And every time, instead of that, what if every time you like something or share something on Facebook, you pay a tiny, tiny amount to the creator of that content, and the platform, I don't know, can take their cut. So you could change the entire model of how Google works and how Facebook works, right? Instead of Google could charge you a tiny, tiny bit every time you make a search, and you don't have, it changes the entire construct there. You have central banks now creating central banks digital currency. This is a very big thing. If you're talking with Visa, they're betting on this being the thing. Okay, so yes, Bitcoin is interesting and programmable money is interesting, but the thing they care about is about money moving from what we have right now into being a digital first kind of creature. And we have machine-to-machine supply chains. You probably know about supply chains more than me, but as somebody told me recently, isn't it funny that I can order, a takeout from a restaurant not far away, and I will have information at any given point. What's the status of that order? Where is the delivery guy? Literally, is he on my street, a street? I have perfect knowledge of that. But if I order a new chair or a new desk and a new chair because I'm working from home now because of COVID, that order wasn't delivered on time. I don't know why that is. The store doesn't know why that is. The local manufacturer doesn't know why that is. Only maybe the sub-supplier of the supplier might know where things are. So the idea of transparency, all that, like, you could get all of that by using a blockchain. And we can, again, this is a really long presentation, but just for itself. So the future, the promise of blockchains is really exciting. Okay, this is something that people are very, very excited about. There's only one problem. Blockchains can't deliver on their promise. Okay, Bitcoin is now doing 4 transactions per second. Ethereum was doing 9 transactions per second. Now it's doing 15 transactions per second. We have actually, like, some credit should go to us on why it's no longer 9, but we can get to that later. But if you want to make just regular transactions like credit card payments, that's 6,000 transactions per second. If you want to do all these things, right, programmable money, micropayments, supply chains, all these kind of things, you need hundreds of thousands of transactions per second. And this is where we come in. So in the blockchain space, there is something known as the scalability problem. The reason that, like, oh, we have these cool idea, but we can't really give it to people to get wide adoption. And the reason for that has a lot to do with how blockchains work. So if you're not familiar with how blockchains work, it's okay. You don't need to know everything. You're going to get a 1-minute crash course on how blockchains work and where is their bottleneck. So the way blockchains work is that people who want to participate, whether that's supply chains who want to give an update where the shipment is, whether that's a payment, whatever you do, you create a transaction. Okay, a transaction is just you doing something. You say, I gave this box of parts to that supplier, and you sign it. The other side sign it. So that event, everybody know exactly when it happened and have transparency for that. And then these transactions, what do you do with them? Oh, they just tell everybody who participated in the network, just tell it to one another. So think of these transactions as floating around in a network, in a data network, and every so often, a unique participant who's called a miner or a validator take these transactions and aggregate them into a block. Okay, so a block is just a long list of all the transactions that it includes. And once he does that, he tells this block to everybody else, and the process repeats. Now that makes no sense. Like, why would you do this entire thing? And here's the key. The result of this slightly bizarre process is a chain of blocks, the blockchain, which contain all the transactions that ever happened. And so if you know of all the blocks, you know which events happen. And it has some cryptographic background that you need to understand and some math around it. But that's the basic idea. People make transactions, entities generate blocks from them. And if you look at all the blocks together, that is the blockchain. And that's all the data everybody needs to know. Okay, why? That's fine. Where's the bottleneck? What's the problem? And where Bloxroute comes into play? The problem is the following. If you want to take a blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum that's doing like 3 or 4 transactions per second, and you want to increase it by 100, okay, not by 1,000, not by 10,000, not by 100,000, just by 100. Well, if you do that, then you're going to have 100 times more transactions floating around. And when somebody tries to create a block of transactions, it's going to be 100 times bigger because it contains 100 times more transactions. And when that person or entity, it's called either a miner or a validator, as I said earlier, try to send that block to everybody else, well, now it has to send a lot more data, 100 times more data, and it takes 100 times longer. And the result of that is you end up doing blocks which are 100 times bigger, but you increase the time between blocks by a factor of 100. So you go kind of like back to square one. You were able to make blocks bigger, but you reduced their speed. Because they take 100 times longer to propagate, then this time between blocks had to be increased by a factor of 100. And this is where the scalability at the network layer really comes into play. So let's assume that everybody in the audience now have some basic understanding of transaction happening and then being aggregated into blocks and all the blocks being the blockchain. The problem isn't processing or data or CPU or storage. The problem is that if you do very, very large blocks, it just takes too long for these blocks to propagate in the network. So this is a networking problem, and I am a networking person, okay? As Kevin mentioned, I have a PhD from Northwestern University. My thesis is called Unchaining the Blockchain Network Layer, and basically we built a system that allows blocks to propagate fast, okay? It's called the Blockchain Distribution Network, or a BDN. It works underneath the blockchain, so it works for all the blockchains out there, and the only thing it does is that allows you to propagate information fast. Now, let's take a step back here and say, okay, so Uri is this technical guy, and he just explained how blockchains generally work, and he said there is a problem at the network layer, and he built a solution, which I'm going to explain in a second, which helps blocks propagate fast. Why do you care? Why would the people in the audience who are mostly in supply chains, but generally from the enterprise perspective of using a blockchain, okay, why should we care about this thing? Because if you want to use a blockchain in your enterprise or in your entity, whether that's a governmental or business, you probably need a lot of transactions, more than you think. Okay, so if you want to say, oh, well, this is great. I spoke with somebody from the retail, like a big clothing company. And they say, well, yes, we sell clothes. We have 5,000 suppliers. Each supplier has 10 to 20 sub-suppliers. And think of all these people who want to, like if you want to have absolute transparency into what's happening in your supply chain, or a different aspect is collaborating with a different business and kind of like, okay, if you have a joint venture and you want to work together, but you don't want everything to run on their system, they don't want everything running on your system. The end result being that you have a lot of people who need to interact and need to make a lot of these transactions, and you can't achieve that without a network solution. So if you're speaking out there and there are like people, oh yeah, use a blockchain for this. This is like, it's an absolute, it's easy, just do it, great. But you're likely going to run into the scalability problem faster than you think. And we can spend some time on that, but I'm going to circle back to this later. So I'm going to say very quickly what is it that we do, just so, you know, to have a basic understanding. So we're called Bloxroute because we route blocks, okay? As I said earlier, the idea is that how can you send blocks faster, even they're 100 times bigger or 1,000 times? We're now working in production and we're propagating blocks close to the speed of light in production in the real world. if there are questions on specifics, I can answer that later. The principle of what we do is actually not, hold on, just checking my time here. Okay. The principle of what we do isn't that complex. The idea is that blockchains have unique characteristics, as I described at the beginning. There are these floating transactions which are aggregated into blocks. And we identified that if you want to create very large blocks, so let's say I am a validator in the chain and I created a block and Kevin is another participant and I want to send it to him. Well, instead of aggregating all these transactions into a block and sending it over the wire, I could just tell him, hey, Kevin, I have here transaction 5, 37, 105, 45, 63. So just tell him which transactions are in there instead of actually sending him the transaction. And that allows us to compact and compress the blocks by a factor of 100 out of the gate, but we can do even better. We can do between 10,000, between 1,000 and 10,000 better. So we're not really a blockchain company, okay? I won't try to sell you, oh, use my blockchain solution, okay? I am much closer to being a, AT&T or Comcast or Cloudflare or Akamai, okay? I'm a networking company. You send your data right now. Let's say if your company has, I don't know, 3 different data centers around the world and you have so-and-so offices and they're connected over a network, I allow you to, I'm telling you, oh, use my network for this communication. You don't need to change a thing in what you do, but you can achieve scalability because we will send your data faster around the world. Why is it that we're doing this thing? Why it's all Bloxroute? Like I was way on my way to be a professor in academia and I had no intention of doing a startup. So why is it that I decided that it's worth pursuing what we do? Well, turns out that the blockchain, the opportunity size in the blockchain domain and scalability is just too big to give up on. This isn't $1 million idea. This is $1 billion idea. And it's very hard to say no to $1 billion idea. So I'm talking here, so FYI, we were able to take the oldest blockchain out there, Bitcoin. It's the first, it's the simplest. And we were able to run it at 3,000 transactions per second, okay? In production with hundreds of nodes all around the world, not changing a single thing in the blockchain except for allowing larger blocks much, much faster and using the Bloxroute technology. So we were already able to achieve 3,000 transactions per second, and we know how to achieve 30,000, and the end game is 300,000. And this takes us a bit, like our business model is slightly close to the Visa business model. The idea is that we're facilitators of transaction, and we're very cheap. You pay us a fraction of a cent for the things that we do. But if you do something at scale, it just like the money just ends up really, really nicely. I want to give one quick thing for you. I know some of the people in the crowd are from the finance side of things. We're a networking company that puts us in a unique position that we can allow financial entities to do things on blockchain that they couldn't do otherwise. Specifically, we're connected, if you're using a public blockchain like Ethereum, we're connected to all the major participants, all the miners, all the big businesses, or let's say majority, not all, but really a lot of them. That means that we can allow you to see what's happening on the blockchain in real time. So for the beginning, I told you that, transaction float out there waiting to be added to the blockchain. Everything related to trading, managing risk, and identify what's happening in the market, whether that's for market making or for other purposes, you really want to know which transactions take place on the blockchain as it happens. And so we created this service that you can listen. We'll tell you not just what you hear from the, like you can just listen to the network, but that means you're hearing about things 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds after they actually happen. And we minimize that. You hear it about up close to the speed of light, pretty much as it happens. And so within 100 milliseconds or so. For those who are financial actors, this turns out to be a lot of the time, very exciting. Just last words on, okay, what's our status like? Okay, so he spoke a lot about what they do. Is this already in production? Does it work? How big they are? The company was founded 3 years ago. We're 17 employees right now, mostly in Chicago, but a few people in Israel. We have, it says 12 patents here. I think it's more than that right now. And we're looking, most of our focus is on the open or public blockchains like Ethereum, but some enterprise blockchain projects we found interesting and we're working with. So if any of that is of interest for you, or if you just have questions of blockchains, I'm more than happy to answer.
Our next speaker is David Freeman. He's founder and CEO of DLT Labs. Based in Toronto, DLT Labs has developed a leading platform for digital transformation with a complete suite of digital ledger technologies for enterprise. David is responsible for leading the business in Japan and works closely with all Japanese employees, clients, and partners. David has over 15 years of building businesses around the globe as an international businessman.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to clarify one thing, I'm not CEO of the company. We have a CEO in Toronto that runs the company. I'm in charge of the business in Japan, so that's my mandate. I am a co-founder and board member of the global company, but my responsibility is the Japan business. So just a quick overview of the company. We are 225 people today with offices around the world. We have a very strong partnership model. We are technology partners for some of the larger consultancies and also smaller consultancies. So you can see the Deloitte, PwC, and KPMG. We've been very fortunate to have success to date, and we've been featured in a lot of articles and media, and we've been very fortunate to take our application and solution into production with many clients, and the business is growing aggressively. As far as our Japan business, we've been in Japan for about 3 years. The first year and a half was a lot of R&D and just talking to people. And we officially launched maybe a year and a half ago our commercial operations, or our ability to sell in Japan. So we are incorporated in Japan. So we have a Japanese legal entity. We have an office in Nihonbashi. We offer our technology in Japanese, we contract in Japanese, and we also have a slightly different way of operating in Japan to leverage the local market because we understand how it operates a little differently. So we really work with any partner, whether it's one of the major consulting partners or the system integrators there. We have partners that we work closely with, but we also have clients that have their preferred vendor or they have their in-house system integrator, and we'll work with anyone or any way that the client wishes. What we do with blockchain and enterprise blockchain is, what we've done is we've tried to find a way to uncomplicate the technology and allow businesses to consume it in a way so we're talking the language of business and we're able to solve business problems. So we don't want to sell technology to companies. We don't want to have to explain to them how the technology works. We've provided a turnkey solution, and what we're able to do is we're able to identify business pain points, and we're able to provide traditional software service. So whether it's enterprise support, enterprise scalability, and different issues that really affect businesses. So with blockchain, what we try to do is we're trying to uncomplicate trust. And what we've seen with enterprises over the last few decades is they consume more and more systems and technology, and the technologies work very well, but they work very well on an isolated basis. So, one company might have their ERP system or their transportation management system, and it works well within the company, but they're not great solutions for sharing that data across multiple organizations. And that's where we come in with a solution to really enabling multi-party processes. So our solution is a configurable solution, and it allows for real-time information sharing. So you don't have people running off their own information. So there's a lot of spreadsheets, there's a lot of data silos, and we're able to remove that. We're able to automate the execution of criteria, whether it's contract or formulas, via smart contracts. So this streamlines and accelerates the process, and it provides that information to all parties in real time. So no one's now working in a silo. And I think, you know, the most important thing is the tamper-proof and traceable history. So on top of the solution, the value that the blockchain brings is everyone has an immutable copy of the history of everything that happened. So there's no going back and forth about what happened, what the source of truth is, what the actual information is. Everyone is truly working off the same information. So what we've created at DLT is we've created a completely configurable platform that's made up of different modules. And this allows us to be vertical agnostic, use case agnostic, geography agnostic. So this is what's really allowed us to expand globally and touch multiple different use cases. So we're able to actually go into clients and talk business problems, understand where their pain points are, where the inefficiencies are, and how we can quickly put together a solution that can be working and delivering value to the business very quickly. And as each company has its own needs, we're able to take different pieces and configure on the front end. So because we're not developing from client to client, and we're just configuring the front end, it saves a lot of time as far as go to market. It saves a lot of issues as far as security testing within organizations, scalability, and so forth. And just to let everyone on the call know, a majority of this platform is available in Japanese as well. And we continue to move to make this platform fully available. So what I'll do is I'm going to just walk everyone through a quick use case of how we use this platform to solve a business problem for a client. And I'm going to show you a supply chain use case. And you know, I just want to reiterate that this is a generic platform that can be configured for any vertical. So we take a workflow solution, and what we're doing is we're doing freight for Walmart, which I'll walk you through, where we're also tracking minerals in Congo. We're working with insurance companies to streamline their workflow and the information that comes back and forth. Waste management, and the trading companies, the automobile companies. So one solution can be quickly configured and deployed regardless of what the business need is. So I'm just going to jump into the use case, and hopefully this will bring the theoretical into real life. So today we've deployed a production solution with Walmart Canada, where 100% of their freight is moving through our solution. In Canada alone, there's over 70 carriers. So there's different people that ship different loads, and there's a lot of different information to track. We've had a lot of success with Walmart, and we're very pleased to say that we're moving outside of Canada and having further discussions to deploy this in other business units. So Walmart came to us with a problem on their freight side. Because freight is so complicated and it's the movement of goods and trucks, and there's a lot of calculations, that it was leading to over 70% industry-wide. This isn't just a Walmart problem, but this is industry-wide in North America, of incorrect invoices. And that's because the information that the carriers are using versus the information that Walmart has don't always line up and agree. And what this led to is, it led to 6 to 8 weeks of reconciliation to figure out what the real information should be. It led to over 38% of overpaid transactions, and it led to very high admin costs on both Walmart's side and the carrier side. And the reason for this is because, as you can see here, there's a lot of information that's being shown here on the left-hand side, and that information is being pulled from so many documents. And then on the far right side, you can see that there's so many different participants that need to use the information or consume the information. So what we were able to do with Walmart is we were able to take this very complicated amount of data that was going all over the place and create a central depository for the information on blockchain, which all parties have access to in real time. And you can see how this visual illustrates that it's a lot simpler, because now all the information is going to and coming from the same place. We're able to create analytics and see data that we weren't able to see before, because it's all centralized but distributed on the blockchain. So just to go quick through the process, to tender shipments, and in Canada alone, we're talking about 750,000 shipments a year. US, other markets are substantially larger, and this is just Walmart business. There's the known part, which is when you go to tender something, when you go to tender a shipment, you know where you're shipping from and where you're shipping to. But throughout the whole process, there's a lot of information that needs to be captured and shared amongst all parties. And that's really what the challenge is getting everyone working in real time off the same information. So what we were able to do is we were able to create an ecosystem for them where you can see that it applies to any industry. So we can mimic this in any industry, but we're able to take all the shippers and bring them in to the ecosystem. All the legacy systems, we're able to consume data from there. We're able to consume IoT information. So we now have now all parties have the same understanding of where the goods are, where the trucks are, the train, the ships, the quality of the goods, the route the truck took, the temperature of the truck, and so forth. And we're able to create these mini ecosystems for our clients, regardless of industry or location. So how it works. So very quickly, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this process, but when we started with Walmart, there was an 11-step process to how they tender a shipment, transport the good, reconcile that invoice, generate the invoice, submit it into the shipper, and then it goes back and forth to compare, is all the information correct, or is there a discrepancy within that information? And what we were able to do is we were able to take that long manual process that was error prone, and we were able to cut out a lot of steps through automation, through everyone being on the same page. And right here, you can see that we brought it down to a 5-step process because we didn't need to generate an invoice because everyone's working off the same platform, the same information, and looking at the same invoice the entire way. We're pulling GPS information and we're calculating all the charges in real time. So there's no need to actually add information from either side's system. All that information is being pulled in here. And the biggest thing that shows value in this use case, but also for many different industries, is there's no need to reconcile information because everyone is using the same information. And the contracts, the upfront terms are already agreed upon, so we're just enforcing it. So very quickly, through this shipment, as soon as the shipment gets tendered, we already know where it's going and the date and what the charges are. So everyone's on the same page. And then once the shipment starts to move, we understand that there's going to be additional charges based on movements, and depending on where and how the movements happens, that actually determines what those charges should be. So what we do is we consume the IoT data to automatically calculate this invoice throughout that movement, and all parties have access to this. The information is validated, all the extra charges are added, and right now the carriers can, right on the platform, can view this, can verify everything, the taxes get added, and they can go and they can submit this invoice to Walmart and get paid very quickly. So very quickly, back to the whole notion that we are the central point as far as software goes for all this information, but everyone has a copy of that information through their node on the blockchain is where a lot of the benefit happens. So we're able to connect via EDI to receive all the tenders. We're able to have the entire approval process captured. FourKites is the GPS data, so we're integrated into all the trucks, trains, and boats to be able to consume that information as the source of truth. And we're able to calculate accessorial costs and actually execute the payments. The results of this, we've had huge success with Walmart running this in production. They've gone from over 70% of invoices in dispute or with errors to under 2%. And they're really able to save time, see business value, and they've seen a tremendous ROI on this investment. There's been a dramatic improvement across the board. We're actually working with them to build this out. Now that they have the real invoice in real time, they're talking about financing, we're early paying, we're eliminating paper transactions and so forth. And I know I'm running out of time, so thank you for letting me get through it. Please note my email. If anyone's interested in seeing this presentation in Japanese, I'm able to provide this presentation in Japanese as well. So just let me know and I can send a copy. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, David. And David, apologies for messing up your title at the beginning there. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our final speaker and final company, Mark Daly, Head of Business Development from Zero Hash, a regulated settlement platform for digital assets. Formerly known as SeedCX, Zero Hash is on a mission to empower innovators by delivering access to the financial system 2.0 digital assets. Zero Hash powers your favorite brokerage app or neobank to offer crypto, provide the rails to the 2.0 payment processors, and give platforms the ability to facilitate the instantaneous cross-border payments and eliminate complexity for moving assets for the world's largest liquidity providers. Prior to Zero Hash, Mark led European sales for Advantage Futures, a Chicago-based derivatives clearing firm, and making the move into the digital asset space in 2018. So I'll go ahead and close this poll. And Mark, if you want to come up, bring your screen up.
Yeah, well, thank you, Kevin. And yes, thank you to the team at Jetro as well for the invite here today. My name is Mark Daly, Head of Business Development for Zero Hash. And at Zero Hash, we're always excited to get involved in these type of events and share information on what we're working on and the problems that we're trying to solve in this digital asset space. So hopefully we can ignite some good conversation here today. Based in Chicago, we're a team of 30 people, all coming from a traditional financial background. And we see digital assets as the financial system 2.0. And our goal as a firm is to provide the institutional settlement backbone in the new financial system. As we said, our clients today consist of neobanks, brokerage apps, exchange platforms, OTC desks, lenders, borrowers, and payment processors. Pretty much any business that touches fiat and crypto and wants to utilize a regulated third party to access clients in the US or Canada. And each of these different groups fit into a different business vertical for us. So we've built Zero Hash to be modular and allow clients to customize their experience and how they work with us. How we work with our clients can really be broken down into 3 different key areas, and that would be calculation, settlement, and custody. And I'll go through each of these separately. When we talk about calculation, we're describing the process of receiving multiple trades from a platform and then calculating net delivery obligations for those trades. And so today we do this for a range of different platforms. It could be a spot or derivatives exchange. It could be a payments firm or a lending institution. And our role here is really to provide the net delivery obligation for these firms and allow them then to utilize us for cross-margining and do this here across multiple platforms. In terms of settlement, this gives an example of how we view digital assets and the digital asset landscape. At Zero Hash, we're in the center here in this icon. We're receiving multiple trades here from different platforms that are connected into the Zero Hash network. And these trades then are delivered to us via API. Upon receipt of these trades, we calculate margin, we calculate the settlement obligations for all of these different participants that are plugged in. And we do this here as a regulated business. We're regulated under FinCEN as a MSB, and we're a money transmitter in 46 states here in the US. Zero Hash isolates all of these digital asset movements, we compress them, and then we deliver them to the blockchain. So we actually settle on chain. And that gives all the stakeholders involved the ability to see their assets outside of our network and use third parties to verify that movements have occurred. I want to touch more on regulation because settlement is ultimately regulated in the US. The settlement of assets is the regulated part of a transaction. And Zero Hash has spent a lot of time and effort getting regulated to do this business in the United States. The US is a patchwork of registrations. Each state has its own regulatory body, and that's the money transmitter license that firms have to get. And so we've gone to 46 different states in the US and become regulated as a money transmitter. We're also a BIT license holder in New York, which was a long process. And we're also registered with in Canada with FINTRAC. The total time to get all these regulatory assets took over 3 years to obtain. And today we provide coverage to over 500 million potential clients on the Zero Hash network. Zero Hash custody, we offer custody as part of our services. We can custody 19 different fiat assets through our partner banks. JPY is one that is very popular with a lot of platforms that we work with. And so we have a lot of exchange clients that are actually based in Japan and that would use Zero Hash to settle between them and their liquidity partners. This is through our unique ability to custody both crypto assets and US dollar and JPY. So we're very much uniquely positioned for this type of flow. To talk a little bit about our wallet infrastructure, and I won't delay too long on this, but essentially we have a secure setup where it's 2 out of 3 keys are used to sign a transaction. Two keys are actually controlled by zero hash, and that would be the user key and the backup key. And then a third key is held by a trusted third party. In our case, it's held by BitGo, who are our trusted third party to hold our third key. 2 out of 3 keys are used to sign a transaction, and so we see this as a secure setup for our clients. I'm going to skip by this. This slide here gives an idea of the flow of funds and how we see the digital asset landscape. You have 3 distinct layers in this setup. You have the execution layer at the top, which would be the platforms which we work with, and this is an example of some of the platforms that we work with today. In the middle, we have the settlement layer, which is where zero hash sits, and on the bottom we have the custody layer, which is the different banks and custodians that we're plugged into. Those would be Zero Hash Custody. You have BMO Harris, which is our main partner bank that we work with. Silvergate, Signature, and Prime Trust are different crypto banks that we're involved with as well. And just to walk through the flow of funds, clients would deposit to these institutions on the bottom. These deposits are captured then by Zero Hash, so we can see fiat assets being deposited into any of these banking institutions. We can see crypto assets being deposited into Zero Hash. And then we would credit those deposits to any of these execution venues here that are required. So, for example, MoonPay could deposit crypto assets into Zero Hash. We could then allocate those crypto assets to any of these execution platforms that they want to interact with. And so the advantage for MoonPay in this scenario is that they don't have to allocate or have funds at each of these different venues to trade with them. They can have it at one centralized layer. So it's almost like a prime brokerage solution for these different crypto platforms. Once trading has occurred on each of these different venues, it's reported back to Zero Hash, and that's where settlement kicks in. So we calculate the net delivery obligations for all participants, and then we actually settle the transactions and move them back to the custody layer here at the bottom, where clients can withdraw back to their own wallets or withdraw back to their own banking infrastructure. One thing I wanted to do today was just walk through a quick case study that we have for one of our clients, which is MoonPay. And MoonPay have a excellent product in that they offer a simple fiat to crypto setup. They developed their product very much outside the US to start, working in Europe and Asia, and really honed their product there. They stayed out of the US market purely because the regulatory barrier to operate in the US is extremely high. As I said, it's a patchwork of registration state by state, where you have to get registered as a money transmitter. And that can take a long time, and it's a pretty arduous process. MoonPay's product is that they offer a simple and secure way for crypto purchasers to buy crypto using credit and debit cards. And they have a full developer suite that allows third parties to actually take this here and build it into their platform so that they can enable their clients to actually have simple access to crypto as well. They're live in over 160 countries, 24/7 support, and operate in 10 different languages. And so why did they want to use Zero Hash? Well, first of all, from a regulatory standpoint, they had to use us to access the US because they didn't have the regulation assets to do that. So Zero Hash can act as a partner on that side. We're already regulated with money transmitter licenses in 46 states, a BIT license in New York, and obviously our FinTrack registrations in Canada. And so today we have a span or coverage for over 500 million different persons in our network. They can also use us for liquidity, which is another driver for them. Given that we're connected to multiple platforms, they could use us to settle with their different liquidity partners. And that's a key driver because it can lower their costs and allow them to actually access crypto and their product for a lower price. And then the final thing is it's a simple integration process. We have a very simple integration. We're all API driven. Typically, our clients get on board and get live within a period of 2 weeks. And just to kind of dive more into the regulation part, it just runs through, again, the key points there. The regulation to operate in the US, it's a very high barrier. Once you get those assets, you actually have to upkeep them as well. And so that's a key hurdle. And with Zero Hash, we've taken that whole process and just brought it down to a simple monthly fee for these clients. So it's very much like a banking as a service platform. You can easily get on board and get live in a very short period of time. Again, just looking here then from a liquidity standpoint, there's over 400 different spot exchanges in the crypto landscape. It's very fragmented in terms of like how liquidity flows. And so there's no real prime brokerage solution out there yet. There's no way that you can have assets allocated to multiple platforms without actually having to have them at multiple platforms. And so there's a huge problem on that side. And Zero Hash solves that problem in that we're already connected to over 25 platforms. You can hold your assets at Zero Hash, but you can trade at multiple different venues, and then we will do post-trade settlement. And that can be all customized on our side as well. Talking about the integration piece, it's a simple API in terms of how we get clients set up. We can take trades via web API or fixed STP, and typically it's a 2-week process. Some of our clients may require that they need custom endpoints built out, and so we're always available to do that type of dev work and get that on board. Just in conclusion and how it worked out for MoonPay, they were able to access new clients that they didn't previously have. So they were able to expand to the US market in a very short period of time. And they were also able to reduce their margins, increase their margins and reduce their costs by having access to new sources of liquidity and having cheaper ways to access that. So that's something that they've seen as a huge plus for using Zero Hash. To kind of wrap it up, and probably a simple way that I always put it is that, through one API connection, it's 4 lines of code, we can give you access to 500 million new clients. And that's how we work with our platforms today. So as I said at the start, our goal is to empower firms to easily adopt digital assets. And that can be whether they're a traditional brokerage group in traditional finance, a neobank, or a payments firm. We can provide the full suite of tools that are needed to enable you to immediately access what we consider the financial system 2.0. That's the end of the presentation for me. My details are there for any other questions, but happy to have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Great presentation. I'd like to remind you, we will be having an upcoming JConnect webinar on October 22nd on the theme of robotics, AI, software. We are currently planning new topics for November and December as well, so please stay tuned. You can check out the new JConnect landing page for further information on registration and the events. Just to kind of kick things off here, I know we have several manufacturers and automotive supply chain companies in the audience today. So I thought maybe our panel could kick it off and discuss how blockchain may affect this industry. So
Sure.
David, go ahead, David.
Yeah. So I mean, I can tell you firsthand. We're talking to a lot of the automotive companies in Japan, and one of the reasons we at DLT Labs actually decided to enter the Japanese market is because in our past software ventures, we've always found Japanese companies very innovative, very forward-thinking. And they tend to adopt new technology earlier, and being in the market now for commercially for over a year, we found a lot of very innovative use cases, and I think the main points are transparency in the supply chain, removing the silos, and getting the different participants on the same page using the same data, and whether it's tracking parts or recalls or the actual shipments and the invoice of the shipments. There's been a lot of different use cases and a lot of innovation. The other thing that we're really seeing in Japan, where we're not seeing it globally, is we're seeing the supply chain companies and the automotive companies leverage digital tokens, so not necessarily cryptocurrency, but digital tokens to facilitate their business, to streamline payments, and to maybe disrupt a little bit on the payment side, because there's so many transactions, a lot of them are intercompany. So thanks.
To add into what David said, I think, first of all, David's presentation was great. I enjoyed it a lot. But David rightfully said that the power of blockchain is not only that, all the data is in one place, because you can get that with a database. And the name decentralized ledger is actually confusing. It's the idea that any participant has a copy of that ledger and everybody are in sync. So nobody can add a record into the database unless everybody else accepted it as well. And this is where something which is, the superpower of blockchains and the thing that's unique there. And that allows, if you envision specifically in a very complex, high value supply chains like automotive, this is where you don't want to figure out there is a problem 6 months afterwards because somewhere along the supply chain something broke and you had no idea. The blockchain piece there allows one supplier gave something to somebody else. He signed that he gave it, the other side signed that he got it, as an example. You could do it in numerous designs. But the idea is that if something goes wrong, you know it as it happens immediately. It just doesn't continue to work afterwards. And so I think that supply chains in general are very, very interesting for like a very interesting use case for blockchains. But specifically, automotives is a big one. I like the flight industry as well. Both if you're thinking Boeing, which has, 50,000 sub-suppliers or whatnot when they're trying to build their Dreamliner, or whether you're talking the actual operation in so many moving parts, but everything regarding transit, location, supply chains of high value items such as automotives, these are very, very exciting, which I expect people in the audience probably even know better than me and David on that front.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. High value items like automotive or aerospace are, very important. And also to track the life cycle of those parts to understand, are they original, has there been, updates or additional pieces added. The other very interesting thing that we're seeing on the manufacturing side outside of automotive is authentic versus non-authentic goods, right? So it could be high value goods, like could be watches or anything like that. But how do you know it's authentic from the purchaser side, but also from the company side? How do you know if it's authentic when someone sends it in with a warranty or so forth? And one of the use cases we actually saw was a company that was manufacturing with a third party, and there were items that were showing up online that were authentic but weren't part of their run. So blockchain can really help make sure that you can track what was part of an authentic run versus a non-authentic run, and so forth.
Mark, did you have anything you wanted to add on the manufacturers and automotive?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting part of this whole space, and it is something that we're sort of removed from, being very much on the financial side of it and the exchange. I want to say a lot of our business is done fiat to crypto, but again, when it comes to blockchain assets, we're always in the same sphere, in that we're always tracing assets back as well. Be it from a KYC email perspective, we're tracing where assets come from and where have those assets been before they even touch any of the platforms that we interact with. So yeah, definitely we can see sort of the use cases in the manufacturing and the the OEM space where you're trying to track parts, and also we're seeing this play out in real life almost with this recent news around Boeing and different aircraft that they have where there's structural failures. So it's interesting to see how this technology can apply back to these sort of real world solutions as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think one of the very interesting things is in the supply chain there's so many pieces and they're not attached. And if you think about the idea of streamlining the entire supply chain and everyone having a record of all the interactions between all the companies, so not just the goods, but the interactions, all the data, and then you finish that with a financial payment on it. I mean, the amount of data that you're now bringing to that B2B transaction is revolutionary, right? And companies can now not just see all the invoices they're paying, but they could see an incredible amount of data through that supply chain about what happened leading to that payment.
I wanted to
just
go ahead.
Just to say, I think maybe last remark on that, which is also a bit general remark, but the people in the audience might wonder, okay, so we have all that, but why are we using blockchain for this? What's this like source of truth? Why does that matter? I think the main point that people would like to understand here, or it would be beneficial for them to understand, is that within a single small organization, you could have all that data and you just keep it in the database and that's fine. With a larger organization, as everybody understood, okay, it gets complicated because some people use it one way, you acquired a company, they use a different system, it becomes harder. But when it moves into you working with a third party, okay, you're one company and working with other companies and sub-suppliers, that you have different incentives, right? It's kind of like your supplier just want you to accept it, whether it's great or not great, it passed the some testing or not. You, on the other hand, exactly have the opposite incentive. And so the key of value of the blockchain here is that it's an infrastructure, it's a platform that allows, okay, let's record all the interactions here, but it's not like, oh, I'm working with the other person's systems, right? You are working with the other company's system, which you're not going to like, right? Because they can play with it, they can tweak it however you'd like. You want it to be something like it's a neutral platform. Everybody can interact with it, can add things to it, remove things to it as they like, whatever their whatever is you can do with it. But it's not in the control of one of them. It's this uniting platform that everybody can work with, and everybody know, okay, this is really what happened. And nobody can, despite having different incentives maybe, nobody can play it in their own favor.
And Uri, while I have you on here, I do have a question for Bloxroot. Compression implies loss. So are there any side effects or unintended consequences of the compression process?
First, it's a great question. I said compression, and I usually say compacting just to avoid that. Compression usually means, for those who are not in computer science, you say, oh, well, instead of writing, you know, A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C, I'll just write A every time I see that sequence or something like that. So compression, whereas it does imply loss, we're talking about something simpler than compression. It's almost basic. The fact that we're doing it and nobody did it before us is almost mind-boggling. Here's the key to what we do. Transactions, as I said, propagate and being sent to everybody else. And what we do is that we keep everybody in sync regarding the transactions. So instead of, you know, maybe I heard of a few transactions and Mark heard of a few and David heard of a few, and now by the time we think about who heard what, new transaction came in. We keep knowing different transactions. We're not in sync about which transactions are waiting to be added to the blockchain. But what blockchain does is that keeping everybody in sync. And once we do that, and everybody has exactly the same transaction, which happen in real time, at that point, you don't even need to compress. Okay, so if a block is just a header, like a timestamp, version, a few data field, and then, you know, one transaction, a second transaction, a third transaction, just a list of transactions. What we do is we get a block, we replace each transaction with a number. We say, oh, this is transaction 5, this is 13, this is 47, this is 105. We send this, so we just replace the transaction with the ID. And on the other side, let's say Mark here gets that compacted block, but he knows exactly the same transaction. So when it says 13, he knows which transaction it is. So he replaced each ID back by the original transaction, and he reconstructs the original block. So there is no loss of data at all. The only thing we're doing here really is that on the wire, when I try to send Mark a block, then on the wire, in this critical time that we're trying to minimize, we try to send blocks as fast as possible. We send just much smaller pieces of data because other people know how to reconstruct the full block. So no loss of data. If there was any loss, the scheme wouldn't work at all. It is really about understanding that the unique way blockchains work, transactions happen, then aggregated into blocks. which allows us to leverage that and say, oh, let's keep everybody in sync about the transaction. So when the block comes, we can compress it, or really we can compact it. Just replace transaction with IDs and reconstruct it on the other end. I hope that was clear for whoever asked that question. I prefer talking in person. Something about video calls and not seeing the other person never works the same for me, but I hope it was clear enough.
Sure. Next, I wanted to quickly talk about regulatory challenges. Let's start with Mark. You guys all come from 3 different perspectives, but Mark, you're in more of the financial side, and you've mentioned kind of challenges you've had here, you know, in specifically in state by state and also in Canada. But maybe your strategy might be going into other overseas markets, Japan, for example, Europe, however it may be. So, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, our focus starting off, American company, we focused on the US market. And, you know, a lot of states in the US look at crypto assets as money. And so it's treated in the same way from a regulatory perspective. If you're settling transactions, if you're moving money, moving crypto, you need to be registered to do that there. And so the registrations you need to get are money transmitter licenses. And these are state by state. And so you've got 50 states, you have to get registered in 50 individual states to operate in the US. So far, we're at 46. But as we start to expand out, and we've already started to do this here with Canada, we just recently got registered there with FinTrack. But we are looking at other jurisdictions as well. And obviously Japan is one of the key ones that we're actually focused on. The FSA have their own licensing there. It's also pretty hard to get. It's quite an arduous process to go through with any regulator, and their one is definitely a mark of accreditation as well. And so as a firm, we are looking to expand out, and we will be looking to get registered in Japan and actually get our licensure in place over there. But also, you know, there's other jurisdictions as well that we have in our roadmap. Europe is one, and we also have other countries that we've got sort of lined up on that front as well. But yeah, definitely we're seeing a lot more clarity from regulators as to how crypto assets are treated, and that's happened in the last 2 years. And so it's becoming easier in that you've got definitive guidelines to now work within. Those weren't always there, and so you had a sort of gray market that existed for a long time. But we're excited to see that there's actually more of a distinction being put in place as to how crypto assets are treated, and that's globally. So a lot of progress has been made there in the last 2 years, and it's really helped us to prioritize what jurisdictions we want to move into next. And Japan is definitely one that has made it very clear how crypto assets are treated.
David, DLT Labs is pretty global. Have you guys run into any regulatory challenges?
So we don't deal with crypto too much. So that's a little out of scope, but dealing with enterprises, there's lots of regulations, especially when you're touching currency, fiat, and housing different types of information based on industry. For me personally, in the Japan market, since we work with partners, we work through the consultancies and the system integrators. A lot of that work falls on them right? They've got the relationship with the clients. They know their business. They know the regulations. So when we're coming up with a bespoke solution for that client, part of that is them understanding that landscape and being able to navigate it.
And Uri, do you have anything you want to chime in on when it comes to regulatory challenges here in the US?
Yes, but I'll say it from my CEO, co-founder of a startup in crypto more than anything else. We had this great idea of how we can allow people to invest in us and kind of like get a share of our revenue. So it's kind of like we're a network layer, and the idea is that we're anybody who wants to, instead of buying stock the regular way, but if we're making so much money, and if some of it is in crypto, can we give it to others? And so we went to the route of security tokens. Okay, the idea of having stocks represented as digital tokens, and actually we have that. So we have a preferred stock series, which each stock is represented by a single token on top of the Ethereum network. But we started with that process over 2 years ago, but we hoped the regulation would be much, much clearer by now. So we actually have it, but we might not pursue this route. So everybody were very excited about putting securities on tokens and having like stocks on tokens, and it does make a lot of sense. And you can do things with it that you couldn't otherwise. While you can do Robinhood, right? If everybody are familiar with the Robinhood ad, the idea is that if you want to open the stock, really the financial system to people from outside, rather than, oh, you have to work through one of the large companies that give you access to it. This is something very, very exciting, but it's taking a lot longer than people anticipated, at least here in the US. Some other jurisdictions are significantly better, but with the importance of the US practically in every market, then everybody kind of like default to make sure they're also okay on the US side. And it had been hard. It had been hard for us, not because it really affects our business and day to day, rather than what it would have been so much nicer to work in a very, like with a lot of clarity on what's okay and what you can do and what can't you do and how you can achieve any of those things, rather than, guess what you're doing.
Rory, I'd like to keep you on here just to talk quickly about cybersecurity and the overall adoption for blockchain. And there's obviously a lot of positives for supporting the adoption of blockchain technologies, but maybe there's still some negative perceptions due to cybersecurity issues. So could you maybe dive into that?
Sure. So crypto got a bad reputation, right? It's kind of like, oh, it's all used for either scam or money laundering. Well, the scams, you might as well say something, oh, there's something to it, not because it has anything to do with crypto, because it's a new domain. It's not very different from what happened, in the 2000, the dot-com boom, and all sorts of like, oh, startup, they said, oh, we're going to build something, which was completely impossible, but people threw money on it and they IPO'd. So very similar can happen here, but with crypto, you have less of the ability to go after people is slightly smaller. But I want to say for a second about like money laundering, etc., that money laundering happens mostly in US dollars. Then, also with Euro and with JPY, etc. Crypto isn't a big thing there. So like everybody are thinking, oh, this is digital. It's happened. God knows what it's used in the dark net, which sounds scary. So this is something people are forgetting, or let's emphasize something important about here. Before there was a way to buy something on eBay and Amazon and use your credit card online, most of the stuff they bought was paid in cash. Okay, cash is a thing that you give to somebody else. He takes it. Nobody in the world knows that this transaction happened. Nobody knows, there is no proof or something like that. So cash is used in a way that I give you, and it's no longer mine, and now you hold it. And the entire idea of crypto is that you could do the same with a digital item. So I give you something, you now hold it, and I no longer have access to it. So yes, if I bought something from you and you didn't send I bought shoes from you and you didn't send me the shoes, I have an issue, right? I gave you the money and I didn't get it back. But that's not something unique to crypto. You had the same problem if you would have paid with just cash. The unique thing about cryptocurrencies is that you could have this cash function, but as in a digital form. And it's worth doing because, there are credit card companies out there that take 2-3% out of every transaction. And a lot of people would rather not pay a lot of billions or trillions, depending how you count it, to these. It's also financially inclusive. So crypto really got the question about cybersecurity and the wrong image about it. It should be the complete opposite. The idea is that how in banks you can't open an account if you don't have the right documents. If you move to a different country and you want to open, oh, well, you need this form, that form. And crypto is kind of like, oh, you want to be able to accept cash? It's kind of like, do you have a pocket? Yes, then you can accept cash. It's the same thing. Do you have a smartphone? You can run this app. You can get payments. You can send payments. You just don't need to be next to the other person. You don't need to give it in their hand. You just send it to them the way you would send email. And this goes back to This is why it's so revolutionary. Okay, now go taking this from this domain of, you know, crypto and cryptocurrencies into what might be more interesting for people in the audience regarding supply chains, etc. The security of these systems is actually much greater and better than what you have right now. What you have right now is a single database, or databases your company runs probably using somebody else's data center, and somebody can go there and play with your records, whether that's an internal employee, whether that's somebody hacking that, whether that's somebody doing a ransomware, right? They got all your data and they can burn the entire thing unless you pay them so and so money. And these data vulnerabilities is something that exists regardless of anything, but blockchains help to minimize them. So as I said at the beginning, the superpower of blockchains is that you have this database, and I have this database, and David has it, and Mark has it. Everybody has their own copy. And if somebody hacks into my computer and messes up with mine, it doesn't affect anybody else's, and it won't, like, it's gonna, yeah, the system continues to operate. And the fact that somebody changed, it's as if we all have a book, right? We all have Pinocchio, okay? And somebody took my book and changed the first three letters. Does that change what everybody think is the book? No. You know that, like, you have your own copy of what the book is, and you know nobody, if something happened to it on the other side of the world, it doesn't affect your copy unless it was valid, unless everybody said, okay, this is the new version of the book and it's accepted. So it doesn't open cybersecurity vectors, it actually closes one. This entire movement has deep roots in the cypherpunk movement, which has a lot to do with saying we should build things in a very secure manner and protocol that helps minimize these kind of risks. One last point on this, because I happen to talk more than I planned on it. Another thing that happened here is if your company is keeping all their data in a database or data center, this is a giant target. Okay, this is, speaking of targets, Target got hacked, right? Their data, all the data is there. It's worth a lot of money. If somebody has access to it, he can do things which are worth money, whether that's stealing data, whether that's changing data. If you're using a blockchain, getting data still has the same problem, but think of it as splitting the target into much smaller targets. So somebody might try to get on them, but they're not now breaking the entire system. They just might come and break your tiny piece of the system. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does, Professor. Thank you. Couldn't have explained it better. David, do you want, from the enterprise level, do you want to talk about cybersecurity and transparency really quick?
I'm a business guy. I'm not a technical guy, so I'll skip that.
Sure. Okay. Mark, any comment on that?
Yeah, no, I think it's Yuri made some really interesting points in that. It reflects a lot back on, I guess, what we do at Zero Hash. David, I'm like yourself. I'm definitely a business guy, not a technical guy, but I got the cliff notes on it. But it's interesting to look at the crypto space, and there was definitely a lot of things that happened early on. And I'm talking from the exchange perspective of there's a lot of exchanges hacked and assets are gone. And, you know, people have moved on and exchanges have moved on since then. I know from our own business, we've actually operated a different structure where we settle on chain for each client. So we don't have like one omnibus wallet structure where everyone's assets are held and you have that huge hack risk. We actually have individual wallets for individual clients for individual assets. And so you spread that target, you make it a lot harder for groups to actually attack your business, and you can secure yourself that way. You can even go a step further for clients and actually allow them to hold a private key. We have 3 private keys. We can allow one of our clients to hold a private key for their assets. And so that's something that you can't do, in traditional institutions. It's something that takes it a step further and gives you even more control. So, these are things I think we've definitely seen on the exchange side, in that early on, a lot of mistakes were made by different firms, and we've tried to grow off that. But it's very interesting to see how it's changed over the years and become so much more secure.
Thank you. Okay, so we need to start wrapping things up here. I want to thank all of our attendees for sticking through to the end here. And I want to give an opportunity for our speakers to give a final comment if they like. So just really quick, Uri, you want to give a final comment?
I didn't come with a prepared, hold on, sorry, something came in. I didn't have a final comment prepared, so I have nothing like that. I do want to say that blockchain's use in enterprise is really, really, really early. Okay, the things that you could do with it, is a bit incredible. The idea is that you can have all sorts of participation of competing companies, right? I like to think of the airline companies that I have to fly United, and there's the American airline, and things might work well together and might not work well together, and that's mostly because American doesn't want to play nice with United and vice versa. So, and none of them. I don't like. It's a longer story to throw it here, but the idea is that you can get quite a lot with blockchains in the enterprise. You can get a lot of clarity. You can have like real-time insight on what's happening, it's very, very, very hard to get in any other way. And again, I'm the scalability guy. So from my perspective, the idea that if you're doing something interesting, you probably need it big. And if you need it big, you really should speak with us, because otherwise it's very likely that your solution would break. So that's my 2 cents on that.
David, would you like to give some final comments?
Sure. Yeah. So from my personal perspective, and I guess the company's perspective, blockchain is here. It's ready for enterprise use. A lot of people say there's a lot of problems or still a couple years out. I think we've proved with our clients that it can be used. You can see a lot of value. And I particularly think as Japanese companies, you should pursue it today, because I've worked all around the world, and the one thing I've noticed in Japan is companies work very well together, and the blockchain is very conducive for that sort of collaboration. And like I said, we've had lots of discussions with a lot of the larger companies in Japan. So please, I encourage everyone to reach out, have a conversation with me, see if I'm already talking to some of your partners, see if we can help your business. And the other thing I can say is there are some challenges sometimes working with Japanese companies as a Western company, and we've already addressed a lot of those. So whether it's Japanese technology, materials, support. So please feel free, please feel comfortable to reach out, to have a conversation, and think of us, even though we're based in Toronto, Canada, as a Japanese company. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David and Mark. Any final comments?
Yeah, thanks for the invite. It was great to be part of this process today. We do have clients in Japan today already. It's a very rich trading environment, and we're excited by the opportunities that we can develop over there. And so if there's firms here that are watching today and are interested in a settlement solution for fiat to crypto, or they're interested in accessing even the US market and want to partner on that, we're available, and please reach out. So excited to follow up here.
Well, thank you very much to our 3 speakers, to our attendees. Thank you for attending, for staying here till the end. And we hope you enjoyed the presentations. Thank you for the questions. Registration will open for our next JConnect webinar probably next week. So please keep an eye out for that on our Jetro USA page, or you might be getting an email for that. So thank you once again, and have a good day.